Hi guys, let's talk about the money market graph. This graph shows the supply and demand for money. So I want to ask you, do you remember what it looks like? You did the reading about it for homework. Take a second and try to draw it. Yes, you learn better when you try things and practice instead of having your teacher always show you how to do it. So pause for a second and try to draw the money market graph. Okay, hopefully you took a second to try to draw it. If you're ready, I don't know, press play. Here we go. So what you should have drawn is the interest rate on the y-axis and the quantity of money on the x-axis. And then money supply is just straight up and down, vertical, and then money demand is down sloping. And what you've just hopefully drawn is actually the liquidity preference model, which says that interest rates are determined by the supply and demand for money. So the intersection of those two lines tells us what the interest rate is. Okay, so first we're going to talk about the demand for money. If you did the CC budgeting activity, you're awesome. If you didn't, you suck. Just kidding. But if you didn't do it, it's actually not, it's meant to help you understand the demand for money. So you really should go back and do it. Otherwise, my slides are not going to make as much sense. So I asked you to graph out CC's budget. I asked you to help her figure out how she should manage her money, and I asked you to do the interest rate on the y-axis and her spending on the x-axis. And her spending is actually her demand for money, right? Because she's given a salary and she can put part of it in savings and part of it as her spending, which would just be MD, demand for money. And so when the interest rate is really, really high, so we're looking at the leftmost pink blob on that graph there. When the interest rate is really high, CC wants to put her money in savings account. And why is that? This is normally when someone would raise their hand and tell me. But when the interest rates are really high, CC is going to earn a lot of interest on the savings that she lends to the bank. So she's not going to be spending a lot of her money because she's putting it all in the bank. So her demand for money, MD, is pretty low. Now, on the flip side, if we slide down the money demand curve and we go to the bottommost right pink blob, when the interest rates are low, if CC has her money in a savings account, is she earning a lot of interest? No, she's not. And so her incentive to put her money in savings is pretty low. And so she's going to put her money then in the opposite category, which is spending. It's not a big deal for her to spend her money because she's not earning that much interest in savings accounts anyway. So the demand for money is explained by the answer to this question here. What's the opportunity cost of money in your pocket? Right? Well, if interest rates are really high, then the opportunity cost of money in your pocket is really high. On the other hand, if money is in your pocket and interest rates are low, then the opportunity cost of holding money is in your pocket is pretty low. I'm going to walk through it one more time. So if you think of money demand as walking around money, hopefully it helps, right? So walking around money is money that you need for walking around, the stores. So it would be cash or money in your checking account. So what's the opportunity cost of money in your pocket when interest rates are high? So if interest rates are high and you have a lot of money stuffed in your jeans pockets, you're foregoing a lot of potential interest rates. You're foregoing a lot of potential interest that you could be earning if your money is in a savings account or in some other financial asset, right? Because you would be earning really high interest rates on that money. On the flip side, what's the opportunity cost of money in your pocket when the interest rates are low? Well, the opportunity cost is pretty low. You're not missing out because banks aren't giving out very good interest rates anyway, so you're not earning a lot of interest on your savings. Hopefully that made sense. It's really hard to lecture when you guys aren't there to ask me questions. I should have said too, if you ever want to like Google Meet or Zoom Meet, we can do that too if you want me to answer questions for you in person. Okay, moving on. So the last point I'd like to make about the demand for money is ceteris paribus. The interest rate is inversely related to the demand for money. So money is downsloping because when interest rates are high, we don't need walking around money because we'd rather put our money in financial assets that give us really great returns. On the other hand, when interest rates are low and you're not getting a lot of interest on your savings, then why would you put your money in a bank? Money demand tends to be pretty high because you don't need to put it in a bank. Let's move on to the supply of money. I have a question for you. If I tell you the Fed lowered interest rates to stimulate the economy, how do they do that? Do they wave a magic wand to do this? Is that how they do it? They just say interest rate is maximus. I don't know. I just made up a Harry Potter spell. That was dumb. Anyways, so how do they lower the interest rates? If you did the reading and the reading made sense, you should be able to answer this question. How does the Fed play with interest rates? Here's the answer. Question: how does the Fed change interest rates? Answer: by changing the money supply. When they change the money supply, they are able to alter interest rates. The Fed controls the money supply. Hey, who controls the money supply? This is where you would all shout out the Fed, but we're not in class, so sad. Here's a picture of the full money market graph. And as you can see from that red line, that's the money supply curve. And it says at the bottom, money supply chosen by the Fed. Those are the guys they pay the big bucks to, and women, there are women on the board too, to decide what the money supply should be in our country. So question for you. If the Fed wants to raise interest rates, would they increase or decrease the money supply? Look at the graph, shout out your answer. To raise interest rates, the Fed would decrease the money supply. Now let's talk about the opposite scenario. If they wanted to lower interest rates, would they increase or decrease the money supply? Look at the graph. They would increase the money supply. So that's a graphic way to look at it. Here's another way to think about this. Try to think of the interest rate as the price of obtaining money. Let's say you're broke and you want to borrow money from someone. Well, they're going to charge you interest. And so that interest rate is the price of obtaining money. So when things are plentiful, it's cheaper to obtain them, right? Think about an apple. If there are 500 apples in the world versus 5 apples in the world, it's going to be harder to get an apple when there's only 5 apples in the world versus when there's 500 apples. Same goes for money. So if we increase the money supply, money becomes more plentiful. And so it's cheaper to get money. And so that means interest rates, the price of getting money, are lower and vice versa, right? So if we wanted to raise interest rates, we would decrease the money supply and make it more scarce. And so it's more expensive to get money. Again, I hope that made sense. Okay, we're almost done, guys. So let's revisit the liquidity preference model, which is what I mentioned earlier in this lecture. And it says that when money supply and money demand intersect, that gives you the equilibrium interest rate. But what happens when we are in disequilibrium? Well, let's talk it out. So let's say the economy is currently in disequilibrium and interest rates are currently at point H. In this graph over here, by the way, H stands for high. So interest rates are too high right now. So if you look at point H, tell me, what's greater, money demand or money supply? Take a look at the graph. So hopefully you should have figured out that the supply of money is greater instead of money demand. And so at these high interest rates, people want financial assets. They're like, holy crap, banks are giving out what interest rate? 10%, 11%? I want to put my money in savings accounts. I do not want money demand. I don't want walking around money. I'd rather change my money from cash or checking accounts. I'd rather convert it to a financial asset. I'd rather put it in a savings account. But since we're in disequilibrium, something has to happen in order to meet this, this demand for financial assets. And so if you own a financial asset, you're actually going to lower the interest rates you're offering. And the reason for that is you don't have to offer high interest rates. People would rather put their money in a financial asset. And so you don't have to offer them as high of interest rates because they want to get rid of their walking around money. They don't want their money in a checking account because right now interest rates are pretty good. And so you don't have to offer as much of a return on the savings account or financial asset that you own. Okay, let's look at the opposite scenario. So let's say interest rates are currently at point L. So interest rates are very low right now. So if you have a savings account at a bank, you're not earning a whole lot of interest. So tell me what's greater, the demand for money or the supply for money? So if you look at the graph, you'll see that demand for what we call walking around money is greater. And people don't want their financial assets. Interest rates right now are very low. People are not earning a lot of interest on the savings that they've lent out in these financial assets. So they want to get rid of them. It's the opportunity cost of having money in their pocket is really low right now. And so to entice people to convert their walking around money and lend it out to a savings account at a bank or to put it in a financial assets, the interest rate needs to increase. So in order to entice people to buy financial assets, the interest rates on those financial assets needs to increase so that people are willing to convert their walking around money into money in a savings account or a bond or some other financial asset. Okay, again, for like the 50th time, I hope that made sense. Guys, reach out if you have questions and whatnot. Okay, so now lecture's over, and you should be able to do the following. You should be able to draw the money market graph, explain why MD is downsloping, explain the source of money supply, and explain how interest rates are determined. All right, thanks for listening, folks.